Hi, good night, everyone. Well, in today's lesson, we are going to learn about the communicative language teaching, or so-called CLT. The subject I am studying in this moment is methodological approaches, and my name is Odilia Guirado. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am Odilia Guirado, and I have been a teacher for more than 20 years. Originally, I graduated from the major of veterinary science in the National University. However, I took the Cenevals exam in 2019. I am currently taking this master's degree at EXPRO University. Last year, I took the PGC program from the University of Buckingham, which was a great opportunity in my teaching career. Okay, what would you say that it's the most important feature of your language class? Would it be grammar and vocabulary? Would it be a focus on structure and phonics? Would it be to empower communication skills? Or would it be speaking and listening? Think about it. Each school has its own methodology. Each school has its own philosophy and approach. For example, I learned in a very grammatical methodology and in the 80s. Despite that situation, I got to speak English. But now everything has changed and our philosophy has changed as well. So let's see. Let's learn a little bit about CLT. Very good. Okay, I will talk about this first. The CLT is an approach, is not a method. It's an approach based on many theories from experts in the field. The most important feature is that it acknowledges that the learners are individuals with individual features like affective facets, physical facets, and also cognitive abilities. This idea is more humanistic. So, one of the most important things is that CLT will not focus on grammar, will not focus on accuracy of structure. It will focus more on the function of the language, meaning to communicate in a social background. Let's continue. Okay, what would be the most important focus on the CLT? Wilkins said that all of us as human beings need to communicate, and that language is that vessel of communication since ancient times, since the humankind learned to communicate their ideas to one another using sounds. We needed that language as a vessel to share these ideas, okay? Therefore, the learner needs to acknowledge this function of the language, not the system. With system, I mean the structure, accuracy, grammar, phonics, vocabulary, etc. So, in this case, the function of the language will be more important than its system. Okay, do you have questions up to here? Thank you. Which are some important features of the CLT? The first important feature is that errors and mistakes are welcomed because the learner is an active part, and making mistakes mean that this learner is using the language to communicate his or her ideas in a social background. Furthermore, these mistakes are a key component to address structure in a friendly way. So, being said so, the learner takes an active role in his or her own progress upon this language. The other important feature is to register and language function. What means to register? To register is to understand or to acknowledge the type of language used in different situations. For instance, it wouldn't be the same the way I am speaking to you in this moment since you are my students or teachers trainees than how I would have acknowledged my students who are 10 years old, are fourth graders, or how I acknowledge my friends or I address to them. Okay? So this learner needs to understand what is the context in which he or she is trying to convey this message. Sometimes we will use more formal vocabulary and structure. And also, for example, it is not the same to write a letter to a friend than to write an essay or a report, a review for a magazine. We will use different type of language. So these are some key components that are developed in this approach. Okay? Remember, the learner takes an active role in this process. Okay, now think a little bit about this. What is more important, or what would be the difference between communicative competence or linguistic competence? Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, the main difference is the following. It is very interesting because both terms are related to each other. The first term, known as linguistic competence, was developed by Chomsky. Chomsky wrote or thought about this philosophy in 1956. For Chomsky, there were individuals that were more skillful than others while acquiring a language. Therefore, for him was very, very important the acquisition and the mastery of the system of rules of a particular language's structure. Okay? So for Chomsky, this was the most important, the linguistic competence, accuracy. However, some years later, Himes completed this idea. This does not mean that the idea is totally opposite to his, but he added the word communication, communicative competence. According to Himes, this competence reflects the belief that language is used or in a social context, that all of us as individuals, as human beings, we need language to communicate our ideas to others, to convey messages. Okay, it does not mean that it's totally opposite to Chomsky. It's just a little bit more developed. Remember, these ideas were written in different times. The theories are totally accurate but developed in different moments of the English language teaching. Okay, these are some important facts about CLT. In order to gain communicative competence, the learner needs to know the language and needs to know how and when to use this language. Okay? So the learner will use the language depending on the situation, depending on the person he or she is talking to, depending on the accuracy he needs to use. This does not mean that the learner won't learn grammar, won't have phonological awareness or structure accuracy. But the difference will be that he or she will develop this competence through actually and actively communicating with other people. Okay? It is not only one competence. We are talking about grammatical competence, which is gained through the use of language. We are talking about social linguistic competence, which means that the learner will be able to use certain vocabulary in particular situations. This means discourse competence. How able is this person to deliver a coherent message? Okay, and finally, the strategy. How able this person is to maintain, to begin, maintain, and end a message. Okay, all of this means the communicative competence. So it is a little bit more complex than just speaking or listening or using grammar. It's a more holistic idea of learning and teaching a language. Okay, let's see how much you have learned during this lesson. Okay, what is something that you learned today? Thank you. So, the CLT method. Very good. Is it true or false that CLT focuses on the system of language rather than its function? Think about it. True or false? Yeah, it is false. The accuracy will be important, but not the main core of this approach. Okay, is this true? Do you agree or disagree that the most important thing of the language is to learn structure in order to convey a message? Some of you might agree or disagree because we all teach under a different philosophy in our schools. Okay? There are schools that are more systematically and pragmatic, who have very traditional methodologies. However, in my case, I would disagree with this statement because in my school has a more holistic way of teaching English. Firstly, because the language of instruction is English, and secondly, because we teach under a transdisciplinary idea, which means that students are in constant communication with each other using the target language, which is English. Very good, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, these are some of the references I used to create this class. Thank you very much for being with me, and I hope that you have learned at least a little bit about the CLT um, approach. Thank you. Have a nice afternoon.